Namaskaram everyone. Welcome to guided meditation session of Vivekananda Samiti under the guidance of Swami Atmashraddhananda Maharaj. We'll have chantings followed by reading from complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Right now we are on the 7th volume, which is in which we are reading inspired talks. After that we'll have guided meditation session, and in the end we'll have question answer session. Maharaj, you can begin.
Yes, thank you, Ankush. Bhai namaste to all. Yesterday we could not continue the class because of the poor connectivity, so we are holding it today. Since I was also free, and so I decided we'll shift it to Sunday today. Although in Ashram, every Sunday we used to hold a meditation class from 9:30 to 10:30. The last 3 weeks we could not be held because the severe cold. Only 2 or 3 people come, so we told them, and now it has been postponed. Maybe after a month or so we'll resume that. Anyway, we will start our session here today. As you all know, we begin with Vedic chanting. So I will chant some mantras. So please stay tuned. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shanno Mitrasham Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha. Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Bhadram Karne Vishnuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashe Makshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai Stuštuvagam Sastanubhihi Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vruddhashavaha Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedaha Swasti nastaksho Varishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspatiradadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatar varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. We shall begin by reading from the Inspired Talks. We have been reading from this kind of a diary recording called Inspired Talk. By the by, there is some construction work happening nearby. Is any sound disturbing you? Should I ask them to?
No, Maharaj, it's not loud.
Is it okay?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yes. Right. So I'll read from the Wednesday, 3rd July 1895. Generally speaking, Swami Vivekananda says, human religion begins with fear. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. This is within quotes. But later comes the higher idea. Perfect love casteth out fear. Traces of fear will remain with us until we get knowledge, know what God is. Christ, being man, had to see impurity and denounced it. But God, infinitely higher, does not see iniquity and cannot be angry. Denunciation is never the highest. David's hands were smeared with blood and he could not build the temple, says the Bible. The more we grow in love and virtue and holiness, the more we see love, virtue and holiness outside. All condemnation of the others really condemns ourselves. Adjust the microcosm, which is in your power to do, and the macrocosm will adjust itself for you. It is like the hydrostatic paradox. One drop of water can balance the universe. We cannot see outside what we are not inside. The universe is to us what the huge engine is to the miniature engine. An indication of any error in the tiny engine leads to the imagined trouble in the huge one. Every step that has been really gained in the world has been gained by love. Criticizing can never do any good. It has been tried for thousands of years. Condemnation accomplishes nothing. A real Vedantist must sympathize with all. Monism or absolute oneness is the very soul of Vedanta. Dualists naturally tend to become intolerant, to think theirs is the only way. The Vaishnavas in India who are dualists are a most intolerant sect. Among the Shaivas, another dualist sect, the story is told of a devotee by the name of Ghantakarna, the bell-eared, who was so devout a worshipper of Shiva that he did not even wish to hear the name of other deity. So he wore two bells tied to his ears in order to drown the sound of any voice uttering the other divine names. On account of his intense devotion to Shiva, the latter wanted to teach him that there was no difference between Shiva and Vishnu, so he appeared before him as half Vishnu and half Shiva. At that moment, the devotee was waving incense before him. But so great was the bigotry of Ghantakarna that he saw the fragrance of the incense entering the nostrils of Vishnu. So he thrust his finger into it to prevent the god from enjoying the sweet smell. The meat-eating animals like the lion gives one blow and subsides, but the patient bullock goes on all the day, eating and sleeping as it walks. The live Yankee cannot compete with the rice-eating Chinese coolie. While military power dominates, meat-eating will prevail. But with the advance of science, fighting will grow less, and then the vegetarians will come in. This is our reading for today. We shall now spend some time thinking over what we have read. As Swamiji says, generally speaking, religion begins with fear. So it is said in the prehistoric times, when nothing has been recorded, the man was very much afraid of the elements of nature and things like what is happening in the jungle. The sudden storm will come, or sudden elements of nature can come in some violent form, and there's always a problem called, the predators attacking you. So with that, he started asking whether there is any higher power for us. So that was the beginning of religion, this inquiry into it. But as he grew, man began to see deeper issues involving life. So he found that only external protection also was not all that he wanted. He wanted something more. Though praying to God did lead to that, sometimes is a science that helped the discoveries of the nature's secrets. So as man grew, he started thinking whether there is God. There's a creator, controller, and the ultimate dissolver of the universe. And so that is called the first stage of perception. We call the dualism, the Dvaita, that there is a God different from me eternally, and I am his slave, or I am different from him. And the result, that's what most people think is religion. But as a person grows spiritually, by spiritual growth means his perceptions grow keener and clearer and purer, the spiritual perceptions. So he begins to see that ultimately he is part of the ultimate God. What is known as that this is a Vishishta Dvaita. It is like being part of somebody, like a child is part of his parents. So that is a Vishishta Dvaita. The great teacher of Vishishta Dvaita, Sri Ramanujacharya, 1,000 years back, spoke very beautifully on this subject. It is he who formulated the idea into a philosophy. Then further, as a person grows in his perceptions, according to Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna, a person begins to see that reality which he thought was separate from him, different from him, and now if he's feeling part of that reality, is ultimately he himself. That's called the state of monism or Dvaita. So these three stages may not be traditionally, we don't find them, but this is what Sri Ramakrishna has said that, Swami Vivekananda was asked this question when he was in Madras, that these three stages which you are speaking of, well, we don't find them very clearly mentioned anywhere. Then Swamiji said, well, this was kept for me and Ramakrishna to say that. So that says it all. Well, Swamiji says here, traces of fear will remain with us until we get knowledge and we know what God is. And now, since Swamiji is speaking to the disciples who are chiefly Christians, he refers to this fact that Christ, being man, had to see impurity and denounced it. But God, infinitely higher, does not see iniquity and cannot be angry, which means we sometimes know God is angry. This is our perception. Actually, it's not a question of God being angry. It's a question of how our karmas are working out. And further he says, the more we grow in love and virtue and holiness, these three things, we grow in virtue and love and holiness. As we grow inside, the more we see it outside. The more we see people outside are also loving, virtuous, and holy. So then in this context, he refers to this scientific concept, hydrostatic paradox, where you have the idea that one drop of water can balance the universe. Similarly, he says, adjust the microcosm, which means your own little world, your own mind, attitudes, the microcosm in which you live, and the microcosm will adjust itself for you. It's a very interesting way of putting it. It's also known as the spectacle solution to life. What is spectacle solution? See, I'm wearing the spectacle which is colorless. But suppose I'm wearing blue, then everything will look blue. Suppose somebody wears red, everything will look red. So change your spectacles, so to say. Change your drishtikon, as they say in Hindi. Drishtikon mein parivartan lao. So drishtikon and the way where we station ourselves, that makes, suppose we are positive, we see positive things. The story is told, of Duryodhana and Yudhishthira. So they were asked, Yudhishthira was asked, find out somebody who is absolute evil. Now Yudhishthira was a good man. So after a long search, he said, no, there is nobody fully evil. There is some good in him. And Duryodhana was asked to find out somebody who is absolutely good. He also couldn't find it. He said, no, everywhere in all good people, there is some evil inside. So we see as per our perceptions. Yatha pinde tatha brahmande. As is in the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. The microcosm is negative, so the subjective thinking is negative. Everything can be made to be interpreted as negative. So we cannot see what we are not, we cannot see outside what we are not inside. The universe is to us what the huge engine is to the miniature engine. An indication of any error in the tiny engine leads to the imagined trouble in the huge engine. So that's a beautiful way of putting it. And further, he says that every step that has been really gained in the world has been gained by love, not by criticism. So generally, criticism has to be very sparingly done, and that's true in a very creative and loving manner. For every small little things, people jump on with big, their own critical kind of approach, which does not help any growth, because love is important. Love means acceptance. Love means desire to help somebody to change. So Swami further says, Vedantists must sympathize with all. So he says Vaishnavas in general are very intolerant people, because they do not want to think of any other God other than what they believe in. They have their own arguments for it. Then Swamiji refers to, there's another sect among the Shaivites who are also equally very strong, saying that this is only reality. And he tells the story of Ghanta Karna. So Ghanta Karna means one whose Karna, the ear, as a Ghanta, bell. So he has tied to yahan pe ek bell, yahan pe ek bell, two sides. So he wants to hear only Shiva's name. If somebody says any other name, he will move like this, so that the Ghanta sound will drown it. If Ghanta Karna was today, he would have put some headphones and all that. He would have put some other music. Well, that was the olden time when a person is a Ghanta Karna, and in order to teach him that ultimately gods are not different from each other in their essence. Only in their manifestation, one looks Shiva, another is Rama, another is another one God. So God himself assumed the form where half was Shiva and half was Vishnu. And when this man was doing arati, or putting an agarbatti in front, suddenly he saw that God is divided into two. But then he saw that the agarbatti which was holding in his hand, his smell is entering into Vishnu's nostril. He went and took his one finger and placed it against that nostril, so it should not enter there. So that is Ghanta Karna, which means so very narrow-minded, so very small-minded. Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda were definitely against it. So he says he put the finger into it to prevent the god from enjoying the sweet smell. So Ghanta Karna, all of us have got sometimes a Ghanta Karna present in us. And we just don't want to hear, or we are very intolerant we become. We should be very willing to accept others. At the same time, we must not leave our own faith. Many times people think that by way of acceptance of every religious tradition means I will have my own roots. No, we must have our own roots, our own Sanatani roots, whatever we have, but we respect and we accept also. Not only respect, we accept. Yes, this is your way, right? Very good. We have all the best wishes for you. Finally, Swamiji ends the thing by referring to a very queer fact. He says the meat-eating animals like the lion gives one blow and subsides. That's it. Whereas the patient bullock goes on all the day eating and sleeping as it walks. So the rice-eating person, so to say, and the meat-eating person. There's a difference Swamiji is speaking of. And then he says the live Yankee cannot compete with the rice-eating Chinese coolie. It's very true. I haven't read myself. One of my senior monks, Swamiji, used to tell that during the Vietnam War, so Vietnam is almost like Chinese descent, like that. Not that they are Chinese, their descent, their pictures, etc. Recently, one famous Vietnamese monk, I think 2 days back, he passed away. He was a great monk, a great person. His name was Thich Nhat Hanh. So he lived in Thailand. He was born there. Then he lived for 40 years in France. Then recently he came back as a Buddhist monk. Well, this Vietnamese fought, the Vietnam War went on for nearly 2 decades. The Chinese had the best of things to eat. The Americans had the best of things to eat. They were airdropped with the cheese and chocolates and omelets and everything. With all the energy and all that, they could not win the war. Whereas these ordinary soldiers of Vietnam, they'll be just eating rice gruel. You know what is gruel? It's called in South Indian language ganji. Here they'll kada, something like kada, or you can say rice which is full of water, watery rice. And with that, they fought these Americans out. Imagine this. And so many died in the process from both sides. So Swamiji says, while the military power dominates, the meat eating will prevail because physical strength is required, which people going to Siachen and Kargil-like places, they need a lot of warmth and energy, which meat eating seems to give them. But that's not so universally. So mostly this is what is important. But then this is actually how true Swamiji has predicted. With the advance of science, fighting will grow less. Now it's all drone fighting. And further, maybe something more will happen. And the vegetarians will come in. Very true. More and more vegetarianism will come because now the physical fight is less. There is, some people are very fond of the non-vegetarian taste, so difficult to give up, and we can argue on either sides. We will not go into details, but generally speaking, for those who want to live meditative life, vegetarianism is a great help, a great help. So this is our discussion for today. So let us sit and meditate, try to meditate. I request everyone to sit straight and keep your head and neck and spine straight. Close your eyes. Let us feel relaxed, calm. Let us not allow ourselves into a worrying mode, worrying about something, or a regretful mode, being regretful about something. Both are kind of a negative modes. We have the freedom, we have the power and competence to change these modes. Sthiram Sukham Asanam. When a person is meditating, let him sit in a sthira, in an unmoving and sukham, in a comfortable posture, asanam. So if you are sitting on the floor, sit straight. If you're sitting on the chair, sit straight. Don't take too much of any help for the back. But if you are having any back issue, any pain, etc., you may take it, but don't slouch. Sit straight. Let us send thoughtful, helpful thoughts for all. Let us forgive all, and let us seek forgiveness from all. Let us feel our heart is filled with goodness, with charity, charitable feeling, with purity of mind, and let our thoughts, our emotions, for the good of all, go in all directions, east and west, north and south. Let us mentally bow down to all forms of God, to all great sages, may the blessings be upon us from all great sages, from all great teachers of meditation. We bow down to them humbly, seek their grace. And then let us try to keep the mind in the present moment. Bring yourself to the present date. Today is the date, 23rd of January 2022. Today is Sunday. Bring to the date, then to the time, nearly 11 o'clock plus around 11:30. Similarly to the place, wherever you are sitting, and think of the sensations of your own body in the present moment, wherever you are. Try to feel where you are sitting. Feel the carpet where you are sitting. And feel the various limbs of your body. Feel your both the feet, the soles of the feet, the calf muscles, knee joints, thighs, hip joints, the upper body, the spine, shoulders, chest, abdomen. Try to feel the beats of the heart. And how you are breathing. When you breathe in, there is heaving up and heaving down. Both the hands, palms of the hands, the upper arms, the shoulders, neck, head, forehead. Eyes, ears, tip of the nose. Think of the whole body as relaxed, strong, healthy. Now think of your breathing, the power which is there behind this bodily system, the prana shakti. Breathe in consciously and breathe out consciously. As you breathe in, feel that you are breathing in holy vibrations. Let us try to now come to the mental level. Try to feel the mind, which means feel that you are separate from your mind. You are looking at your mind. Feel that how you are kind of flowing away with thoughts, emotions, memories. Let us try to feel separate from all this. Let us observe ourselves in a very detached, indifferent way. Let us not be reacting to or analyzing our thoughts. This is not the time for that. You are observing our thoughts. And now, let us try to think of an object to focus the mind. Think of any divine object, any divine form, or you can think of the flame of a burning candle. Think of it in the center of the heart or the chest. Think of that form as full of luminosity, a sense of brightness, full of joy. And then try to keep the mind focused on that form. We shall chant Om once, and then try to keep the mind focused in the center of the chest. Any of these forms, select one and be always sticking to that. It could be the flame of a burning candle or any form, divine form, like Rama's form, Krishna's form, like that. So we shall chant Om once, and then try to keep our mind focused inwardly. Let us remain focused as much as possible. Even if the mind wanders away, again bring it back. Now let us conclude. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. You can open the eyes. If there are any questions, we can discuss them.
Maharaj, there is one question from Rahi. Swamiji, my question is that how we could keep ourselves away from the mental thinking, like what they will say if I did this.
If I
Did this.
Okay. This is this question, it requires a kind of a new social adjustment. That what will people say if I do something? If you first of all be clear about what you want to do. If you are clear about meditation, so if I meditate, what people will say? Well, they are not knowing things, so they will say a few things. Then they will slowly accept it. We cannot always say that we don't care for others. We do care for others, but then slowly we must learn to philosophically rise at another level, where we learn to see things in a very detached manner. But that comes after a lot of inner analysis. How much role the society or people around us play or can play in our lives, and how much we should care for them. And there's also a stage where you just don't care for anything. That's called, being detached, completely detached from sukha, dukkha, praise, and criticism. Because it is ultimately the ego which is getting affected. It is not that the soul or Atman, as we call, that's getting affected. It's the ego. So let's have a healthy ego and finally go beyond the ego. First have a healthy ego, have self-image, have a good healthy self-image, and then without a healthy strong ego you cannot achieve anything. You must have a self-confidence. And then finally a stage comes when you begin to see this also a ego principle itself is a cause of my suffering. That I consider myself only this much. So according to our Advaita way of looking at things, when I am part of everybody, then where is the suffering for me? The suffering comes because there is somebody other than me. There is a fear because of that. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad it comes. The moment this idea came that I am born, misery started, pain started. Will the death remove it? No, death will remove it only temporarily. That will only remove because your body is gone, but you are still there and you are looking for another body. So a stage may come when you don't want any body at all. So that's the stage of mukti. So that's a very philosophical answer and understanding. But right now, in a very practical stage of development, do whatever you wish to do, analyze it if it is morally correct, if it is, it just keeps the social ethics in mind, and then don't care about others. Just go on sticking to your ideas.
Thanks, Maharaj. Maharaj, next question is from Swarnendu Saha. I can practice Sakshi Bhav artificially in my meditation only, but when in real life I come face to face with a material object for which I have desires, then I simply act as per my inclination. So does meditation actually help change my tendencies of reacting towards material object or worldly desires in the real life?
So you said artificially, which means not from inwardly. It's not genuinely or practicing. It's only a question of practice. As you go on practicing, it becomes genuine. Say, it's just like when you learn to sing. You are singing a song, you're trying to imitate a singer or a particular raga. It may not be very genuine. You may be making mistakes in that. It doesn't mean that you will not be able to sing it one day. Maybe with due practice, you might be able to sing it. Likewise, these ideas are like that. Once somebody asked Swami Vivekananda, Swamiji, you are telling us that we should remember that we are not the body, mind, the ego, we are the divine. Are you not trying to hypnotize us, kind of a thing, which means to make us feel things which are not true? Swamiji smiled and said, you are already hypnotized. I am trying to dehypnotize you. That's the point. So this desires you have to become to enjoy things of the world, they seem to have become very huge in our mind. But actually, we are giving them power. We are supplying energy, and we are supplying the very source of their existence. So what we are searching for is true joy and bliss, We think the desires will bring us, the fulfillment of desires will bring it, the objects will bring it. And from our own experience, we know that it brings only temporary results. It's not the permanent happiness. So the permanent happiness is in the self, in the calming the mind, purifying the mind, and discovering the self. So once we do that, then this conflict should not come. Then this feeling that I am doing something which is not, I am not actually genuinely doing, it will not come. So let us keep trying. Let us keep educating our mind, retraining our mind, training and retraining. We'll be able to understand it one day.
Thanks, Maharaj. Maharaj, there are 2 more questions. Shall I read it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
Maharaj.
yes.
Maharaj, this question is from Shruti Pandey. Pranam Maharaj, my question is, the more you delve into spiritual realm, is the more it seems to be that most activities around us are futile and in selfish interest. How can I deal with this sense of growing restlessness and inactivity? How to cordially balance Vidya and Avidya?
Oh, that's very nice way of putting it, how to balance Vidya and Avidya. You see, where we stand, let us understand that. Where do we stand? Are we able to live a spiritual life 100%? Which means, can I, in a formal sense, take to a very meditative life and perhaps give up all connections? Sometimes I may feel I must give up all connections and withdraw myself into a kind of a jungle or seclusion. But it only looks nice. But inside, very often, we have very subtle desires. And if a person goes into seclusion, he may find it very painful. So better to make a balance, have some time for your seclusion, have some time for meeting people or being with the people of the world, as far as your work is important. So the Bhagavad Gita gives a solution. It says, Aru Rukshor Muner Yogam. So if you want to grow, do your Karma Yoga in a proper sense. Offer all your fruits of action to God. And slowly that possessiveness which every action seems to generate will come down. And what is called in our scriptures as we become truly Viraja, Rajas. So much of Rajas is there. Rajas means activity, restlessness, desires, ambitions. And on the other side, we have the Sattva also desires for us. So in between comes the Tamas. So from Tamas we should overcome by Rajas, but Rajas also should be overcome. That comes after a lot of Rajas is not just so that I get rid of some restlessness. It also means get rid of certain line of thinking, certain line of finding, oh, all my life will be fulfilled if I become this, I have become that, or if I get particular object. So that is what the Gita says is, do your Karma Yoga, Karma as yoga, offering all your fruits of action to God, and seek purity of mind, and that will slowly educate the mind. See, we often think education means getting books and reading and some certificate, but actually education is a kind of a training of the mind. So we are training it on a spiritual path. We'll surely, if you, in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna says that first karma rightly done, then that will lead to that inner purification, when I'll be able to sit quietly without any of these things which are. So is the goal is not to sit quietly. I should be also able to do good to others. So both balancing, as we grow, it will become clearer to us.
Thanks, Maharaj. Maharaj, next question is from Adarsh. What is the importance of chanting God's name like Rama and Krishna in spiritual life? How far can one achieve by this means in spiritual path?
Oh, repetition of God's name is very, very important. Very important. All our great sages have spoken of very highly of it. And the scriptures have spoken, and also you see the sages like Ramcharitmanas. There are more than 40-50 dohas in praise of Namasmaranam, repetition of God's name. It's very helpful. Spiritually, it's very helpful. So if you have the habit, please keep doing. If you don't have the habit, make one. And there are two ways. One is sit in the morning and evening and sit a certain number of meditation repetitions of japa, say 108 times each. Another is that while other times when you are not counting, say you're traveling in a bus, you're traveling in a train, so you have time, you can repeat God's name inside. It's very helpful.
Thanks, Maharaj. Maharaj, next question is from Sachin. What routine practices should a student follow to overcome selfishness?
One thing I would suggest is that you can do some service. See, one is Shramadana, other is Arthadanam. If you have some money, you can give it to a noble cause. And you can also, if you don't have money so much of funds you don't have to spare, but only to meet your own needs. So don't pressurize yourself to do that. But you can offer your energies and for the good of others, some good cause. What's called Shramadana, dana of your Shrama. How I can, and even third thing is that you can pray for others. Whenever you see some tragedy happening, you see somebody suffering, try to help him, at least mentally praying for him. If you can physically pray, physically help them, good, but not always possible. At least every day sit for some time and pray for the good of all.
Thanks, Maharaj. Maharaj, there are no questions in the chat now.